Welcome to the Francisca Show podcast on JewishCoffeehouse.com, the show where I give a voice to Jewish issues, topics, and people. I'm Francisca, your host. Welcome back, Franstans. Today we are beginning a new journey, a new series called Jewish Communities Around the World. And I would love to continue doing this once every couple of weeks, so maybe once a month. And we will be introducing cultures, communities of Jewish Orthodox people. A funny little story I want to share with you. As I was sharing this idea with someone I often check in with and share what I'm working on, she's like, "Oh, great. You got to interview this rabbi in," and she named a city in America. And I told her that's the whole point. It's not another city in America, even though there are wonderful states and cities and places in the States and Israel that no one has heard of, and maybe I will cover them as well. But the world is so much bigger than just America and Israel. So here we go. We will start with none other than Moscow, Russia, a community that I called home for the first 15 years of my life. If you like this episode and you like this idea, please do let me know so I can continue doing these interviews. If you don't like them, tell me that as well. So if this episode does well, I will definitely look into doing this more. One thing I would like to mention is that I was sick when I was recording this episode, so my voice sounds a little different, but I am better now, so thank you for caring. The throwback episode for today is The Harsh Realities of Baal Tshuva Life with Gevura Davis. The link is in the show notes, so check that out. I do need your help with an episode I'm working on. I am looking for fully divorced individuals to share their reasons for divorce. If you would like to contribute to a future episode, you can record a voice note in a quiet space, speak closely to the microphone part of your phone, and send it to me via WhatsApp. My information will be in the show notes. You can also share your name or remain anonymous. Two more things happening at the end of this episode. Number one, I did allow for Binyamin Mualim to respond to last week's response from Esty. So thank you for all your messages, but I do want to give him one chance to just defend himself before we wrap this up completely. And at the end of this episode, I will also be sharing something really raw from a shadchan I am close with, and she wanted to share this as anonymously as possible. So I will be reading her write-up at the end of the episode. This is a Jewish Coffee House podcast. So if you enjoyed this podcast, you will enjoy the other podcasts on the network. I am also a podcast consultant. I help people launch their podcasts, grow their podcasts. If you would like to support this show, there are many ways you can do that. So feel free to reach out if you'd like to sponsor a future episode or contribute. If you do not want to contribute financially at this time, you can always spread the word about this podcast and help us grow. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back to the show, Franstans. Today with us, we have Sarah Katz all the way from Moscow, Russia. And we are beginning our series of episodes, Jewish Communities Around the World. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Hello, Brady.
We'll start this series with telling us a little bit about yourself and your upbringing, your religious upbringing, and then we'll continue on to the work that you do and the Jewish community that you run.
Thank you, Brady. Okay, so I'm Sarah. I was born in Moscow, actually, in 1989. Back then, my mother became religious when I was 3 years old. So basically, I don't remember any life before that. So that was sort of like, I didn't have a choice in that. But there were, like, my upbringing wasn't very familiar to anyone. It was like a sort of very unique, let's put it that way, because my mother was from, my father wasn't. So I always had this, choice of like whom I'm going to follow more. Then I went to a Jewish school. It was very brand new, opened by Freddy's mother. So I finished that Jewish school. I was an only from kid in my class, which was also a very unique experience in my life. And then I decided not to go and learn in Israel, which everyone probably wished I would. I decided to stay in Moscow. I was an only kid, so I didn't feel like leaving my home when I was 15. So I continued in Moscow, finished university, a secular university here in Moscow, learning with non-Jewish people for 5 years. So I got my master's there. And then I got married in Jerusalem, and also not like a normal person which would stay there and have a normal life. I decided to come back to Moscow with my husband and continue working here. So that's like a very short biography of mine.
It's the first time I'm hearing your biography in this sense.
You
So
see?
super fun.
Okay.
Almost like I'm hearing it for the first time.
Right.
If you were talking to a group of people who are only exposed to communities in, let's say, the US, even if they are in out-of-town communities or in communities in Israel, how would you describe or paint a picture of what life in Moscow is like as a Jewish, observant, religious, Orthodox person?
You mean now or when I was growing up?
Well, let's start with when you were growing up.
I think we all have this, not only people who live in that normal, like, standard Jewish community, but we all have sort of ideas, like stigmas, stereotypes in our head. And we think like, if a kid doesn't have religious friends, so he's not going to be normal. If a kid is from a family where mother and father had very different opinions on, Yiddishkeit, so probably the kid is not going to be okay. Like we all have these ideas in mind. And I also have tons of those ideas in mind. I remember being at a lecture in a seminar, and the Rav was very into saying that if a mother and the father have different religious opinions, so the kid is going to be really crazy. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, I didn't become free. I'm like, okay. So my life taught me that life is very different. And sometimes you think that there's going to be a problem and there's no problem. And everything is so standard and so excellent and just the way you dreamed, 100%, and then we see a problem. I wondered a lot, why Hashem wanted me to grow up in such a, a little crazy situation, being an only, religious kid, and I had to have those philosophical discussions about Yiddishkeit, I think from the age of like 7, 8. People ask me like, why do you do that? And why do you do this? And don't you think it's too much? Whatever. I remember those conversations like when I was a very small kid. And that really prepared me a lot for everything I'm doing today when I'm a grown-up person, an adult, teaching and a rabbinate. So everything is a plan, and we never know why we have certain circumstances in life and what are they trying to teach you. So that's one thing I learned myself, looking at everything I grew up in. Also, that specific background gave me a possibility to understand people who are very different from me. So let's say when my students now are telling me their, crazy life in their houses and what their life looks like, my colleagues who are, let's say, from Israel, shlichot from Israel, are looking at them like, oh my God, what is she talking about? Oh, I gotta help her. It's too much for me. Like, I'm okay with that because, again, like this is what I've heard from the age of 10. I grew up with those, with those kids from very hard families in Russia who have very hard backgrounds and who have fights with their parents about trying to keep kosher. Like that's so normal for me. That's just something which is so natural to talk about. Again, that helps me a lot being who I am now. So that's one thing.
Could you give some more examples of the hard, complicated dynamics in the families?
Like you grew up here also, Freddie, right, in Moscow. So you know that, let's say in my class, which was a great class, by the way, I don't remember. I think only one kid had both parents married. We had, I think, 15 girls. And I had one more friend, which had a mother and a father living under the same roof. Okay? So the rest were like, my father, who is that? Or yes, my father. Oh my God, no, I just don't want to see him. Like that, again, that was their normal. And for me, it was weird and strange. But again, now I have the same picture more or less with my students. And if I would never, ever, ever see such a thing, I would never, ever, ever understand what they're going through. And I would probably tell them advice, which is not so relevant because I would not understand what is the life they're living.
So going back, you had more things you wanted to share.
I wanted to go back to the idea of like stigmas, and stereotypes. So I remember a lot of my teachers were telling me, if you stay in Moscow, if you go to a secular university, you're going to for sure be not frum. Like you're going to be like the guy you're learning with. And it wasn't true. Like it really wasn't true. Actually, the years I spent in this secular university were the most productive years of my religious life because I missed Yiddishkeit so much. And I missed the Jewish sviva, the Jewish friends and the company and everything so much. And I started to learn myself. I started to learn online. That was like my own decision, which I made towards the religious observance and the knowledge of Judaism, which I wanted to be my life after that. So like everything is much more complicated than what we see. I see it now as a challenge for me. I'm a mother of a bar mitzvah boy. And I now soon
Mazel tov, by the way.
I'll have to find like yeshiva for him. So I see this stigmas all the time. Like if he's going to go to this and this yeshiva, he's going to get married to this and that girl. He's not going to get married to this and that. He's going to become that. Like we don't know. Okay.
Okay. But let me stop you right here. You're clearly brilliant because you spent minimal amounts of time in a country where English is the first language. Right. And your English here is fluent and so natural. So you're showing us some extraordinary abilities you have, which may also show up if you are in an environment that's completely non-Jewish, and that inspires you to connect more to your Judaism. But take your average kid who doesn't necessarily connect through learning, who isn't so academic or intellectually able. Maybe their Sviva is very important because that's literally all they're soaking in, because the academics is very limited.
Right. Freddie, I totally agree about the Sviva. I totally agree. Like I'm very, like I'm a mother who is like choosing the Sviva before everything else. Like it's so important for me, like who are my friends' kids, and I spend time with them and I like to invite them home. Like I'm totally into the idea of Sviva. I'm just saying that we have to, I'm a psychologist also, right? I learned a lot of psychology and I work with family and couples here. So when I'm being a psychologist in my private practice, we have such a thing of, tell me if in English it sounds clear, questioning your assumptions. Like I think that, he has this diagnosis, okay? I have to question my assumptions. Like I have to ask so many questions to be sure that I'm right. Because there are people who, you have that, you have that, you have this, okay, you're sick, you're crazy. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm just telling you that my own life showed me that it's much more complicated. And a kid can grow up in a very mixed environment and her friends can be totally not religious. And then those friends will become religious because now it's funny. I look at my class chat and like so many girls are from now. When they're from then, when I needed that the most, they were all not from. But now, like after like 50, I finished school 20 years ago. Oh my goodness, 20 years ago. Now they're from. So I changed them more than they changed me. And I don't think it's because I'm brilliant or something like that. It's just that's the way Hashem wanted it to be. And if we're not putting ourselves in the test, I wasn't clearly putting myself in the situation. I grew up in Moscow. My mother could send me to Lakewood when I was 5. So like, that's just the life Hashem designed for me. I did my best. My mother did my best. We all really tried to be good and to do good and do the right choices, which weren't, by the way, easy. And everything turned out good. Great. Baruch Hashem. I'm just saying that, things are much more complicated than we think they are. That's all I'm trying to say, because the Sviva is an important thing. I agree with you.
What choices did you just imply?
I had a lot of choices in my life, which probably a normal person doesn't have. What do I mean? Like when I was very close with my mother and I was very close with my father. Okay. So I saw their lives being very different. And they lived together in a very, very good shalom bias. Okay. So sometimes people tell me, oh, so probably your parents had a very bad shalom bias. And no, they had a very good shalom bias. I wish all of my religious couples and friends would have such a shalom bias they had. It's again, the assumption. My parents were very clear about like, you can sort of live like your mother and like you can live like your father. You have to choose. And this decision was like in my head. I remember from year 9, 8, maybe. Like it was very clear to me. Here I have a person which I love and respect, and she lives like that. And I have a person which I love and respect, and he lives totally opposed. That's one decision I had. Again, like having so many friends which were not from, which invited me to all their, not kosher birthday parties in their houses. It was a choice to come, not to come, and, to come with my own food, not to come with any food. Like small decisions, which are really not easy, when you're a kid and you don't have any other friends. And these are the friends you have. And then like afterwards going to Israel, because this is the, traditional way for a from girl to do. And in my heart, I understand that I'm not ready to leave my home. What should I do? So many choices like that. And another choice which I had when I already understood it, I would be, a from person. Would I be just from because that's what I was brought in? Or would I be from finding my own path? Like, I remember this is a choice. Maybe it was the biggest choice. Because to be from, not to be from is a very big abstract choice. But then we come to like small things and, okay, are you just following the route and doing what your mother taught you to do? Or are you really like finding your own way in your Avodas Hashem? So that was another choice. And afterwards, to do kiruv or to live a normal life. Because I will explain to you in a few minutes why doing kiruv for me is not a very normal life.
Okay, just tell me quickly what Lakewood was like when you were 5 years old. You arrived there for how long?
I had, if you see me now, I'm like not hiding that. I had a when I was born, I had a very big, how do you say, pitno? Help me with this. I like half of my face was red. Was
a birthmark on your face?
It was huge. Now you see a very small one, but it was huge, huge, huge. And my mother wanted to help me. So in Russia, there were no options for that at that time. Now there are tons. So I had to travel to America, to Lakewood, basically every summer and make those laser operations on my face. So basically, America and Lakewood and everything you mentioned has this medical association in my head, like hospitals and doctors and, like for a kid, and it's still inside. But of course, like there suddenly I see, I'm not the only crazy from kid. There are like thousands of them. Oh my gosh. It was interesting. People related to me as a Nabach Soviet kid who doesn't have anything in her life, no chocolates, and they just gave me all the sweet. They saw it. They bought me like mizvadot, like packages and packages of sweets. And then I came home and I had to cure my stomach because they killed it. Okay, I just remember this, and they said like Nabach, and I didn't understand what they're talking about. Like, who is Nabach over here? Like, I don't know Nabach at all. Just an interesting world. But people, like, first time I saw such an outpouring, of chesed, and people wanted to help, and people were offering their houses and whatever, like help with the medical insurance, everything.
Let's go into your adult professional life, you choosing kiruv. Let's go a little bit more into that.
So when I was not married yet, I was finishing my university. There's one story I want to tell you because I think it's very interesting for what we're talking about. When I was 15, and again, like everyone told my mother, just send her away. Like Israel is waiting for her. She has to become normally from there. She's going to find her shidduch, whatever. And my mother saw that I'm not ready to leave. And my father was very against me leaving the house, like all the balagan. So she wrote a letter, I remember, to Rosh Steinman from Chaya Yosevich. There was a whole sharsheret, how she did this. And she asked Rosh Steinman, what I'm doing here. I have this girl, I have this daughter who, what should I do? And she said, like, if she doesn't feel like leaving the house, she should stay in Moscow and something is going to open up there. When my mother received this letter, it was like, and then stay in Moscow and she will come tomorrow. Like, it was totally not like, okay, are you real? What's living in Moscow? I'm living here for 15 years already. Nothing is there for any adult kids, for any students. Like, what's going to be there? The year I go into this university, which I chose, there was this choral shul where your father was a rabbi. They opened a SNF, they opened the students program, and I'm becoming one of the most, with one of the students who is translating the lectures. I was a student leader, who was very involved in helping build up this program. So when I was already 19, after 4 years of that, I felt that that's what I'm doing all day, basically. I'm translating the shiurim, I'm talking to people about becoming from, I'm organizing Shabbatot in the apartment for the girls. Like, that's basically my life, okay? But I didn't look at this like a professional field because, again, I'm learning my profession over here. I'm learning to become a psychologist. So at that, it just happened that way that this organization, Tramitzion, offered me a job, already doing it, like if you're doing it 24/7, so just go do it, and earn something for that. And then when I was 19, I became the head of this project because Beata Wittgen left. I had to be the new head of the program. And I remember this nightmare. Like, here I'm being like a 19-year-old girl, being a leader of a student program with average age of 25, 27. And there are those boys who are like 2 meters tall and they're stuck in her. And I have to be the head of that program. I'm like, Hashem, what are you? This is the biggest joke you just invented. So that was also a funny choice, to accept something which you don't think you're capable of. and just say yes, or say, no, I'm small, I'm a small girl, leave me alone. I want to get my degree and start off my life. So then I said yes, of course. And that's why when I got married, I told my husband, okay, just a year. Let's please help Russian Jewry for a year. And then we're going to start off our normal lives in Eretz Israel. And here I am, after 14 years of that, still doing what I'm doing, opening my own organization now. It's for young professionals. Again, Hashem exactly knows what he's doing, when he's doing, how he's orchestrating our lives.
Before we go on to more of that, just take us back to your shidduchim. Okay. How did you find your shidduch? What was that like? Because you did stay back in Moscow.
I did stay back in Moscow.
You dated
the worst, nevuah, where it was about, okay, she is there, still from, okay, every year people checked up on me and like, oh, she's still from, wow, okay, let's see next year. I was like this experiment, what did it do when I didn't do everything they expected me to do? Fine. I totally understood that I'm missing, the normal religious education, which I was supposed to get. So my plan was to get the secular education, and then when I was already much, much more grown up, 20s, not 15, I would go and, neve, something else. So every half a year when I had those breaks, winter breaks, summer breaks, I always went to Israel with my friend Esther. And we went to all those seminaries. It was neve, it was Eshet Torah, it was Ayat, like different seminaries. And I tried to, catch up on everything I missed during the school year. And on one of those, stays in Israel when I was 20, I just turned 20, I think, my friend Biada offered me a shidduch there. It was so funny. It was so not standard because I had to live in 2 days, and I was like, who will go date when you're living in 2 days? Only Meshugas. But I still said yes, because I love to say yes when Hashem is throwing something on me. I have this rule of like saying yes. When you have those svekot, and you see, no, I better quit. Like I teach myself, I train myself to say yes and then look for myself. So I went, I met this boy. He was 12 years ahead. Okay, he was 32, I was 20, which was already crazy. And then he was about Shuva. Okay, so I remember calling one of my rabbaniyot and said, no, forget it. He's about Shuva. Can you imagine what he went through? You are totally from Go, right? You were brought up in Yiddishkeit from the age of 3. And something inside of myself always wanted to marry about Shuva. Again, because this was the life which I admired. These were people who changed their lives for Hashem. And for me, that was very romantical, probably. It still is. So I did try, and we went on a few, I think 7-8 gishot, 7-8 shidduchim, and he proposed. And then again, I was 20, and I said, I don't know what to say. My mother doesn't know who you are, so I better go back to Moscow, and we'll see. And that's not. Again, you see, my head was not totally Haredi, lifestyle, 7 meetings, genug. I was a Moscow girl, okay? Very, very from, but not, I didn't have all those, ideas that there's 7 meetings, 8 meetings. I had no idea, okay? So he proposed. I said, I don't know. I'm going back home and I'm going to think. And here is the time when the Yetzer comes, right? So when I'm home, I'm fine, my life is great. Why do I need to get married? It's totally good here. He came to Moscow. I thought it's not going to work. It was a very long story. My husband still laughs at me that he had to wait for 4 months till I said yes. So he really had to wait. I was very confused, young again, and then only we spoke on the phone a lot. And then I remember Purim, I had this inspiration. I call it the Ratzon Elyon, when I tried to figure out with logics, I made all those lists, pluses and minuses. And will he be good in 10 years and in 5 years? All this, the head of an atlichnitzah, you say in Russian, right? The head of a perfectionist. I tried to be Hashem, okay? To know exactly if he's the right one. And it didn't work. I just didn't have this moments of clarity. And then I remember just, giving it up to Hashem, leaving I'm a very controlling personality. I love to control things. But that's how I understood I can't. I just can't. I don't know if it's a yes or a no. I have no idea. So I remember this small shift in my mindset saying, Hashem, really, I made hishtadlos much more than I had to. It's over hishtadlos, okay? Just tell me if it's the right thing or not. And I had this moment of clarity, thank God. I really understood that this is something for me. And I just came, I made a surprise. I came to Israel to meet him, very romantical. We can talk about this to our kids. They love to hear the story again and again. There we had, there was another funny thing. He met me at the airport and he called the Shadchanit afterwards, but she didn't give me an answer. Like she came to Israel, but she didn't give me an answer. So the Shadchanit tells him, so you just talked too much. You were so nervous that you didn't give her a chance to speak. So next Shidduch, she was silent. He didn't say a word. She was just waiting for me to say something. And then I made the decision. I'm a person, again, I'm telling you a lot about myself. I'm a controlling personality, and it's very hard for me to make decisions. I hate making those, big life decisions, very scary. So Hashem gave me a partner who knows how to make decisions like that. And I made the decision. Again, we thought we were going to build our lives in Eretz Yisrael. We both had jobs there. He had a job. I was offered a job. Like everything Mesudar, we rented an apartment. Everything was great. And then I just couldn't leave my students because I loved them so much. And I said, just a year, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone in the proper way. I'm going to leave up my family. It will take time, blah, blah, blah. So that's the beginning of the big story.
Okay. So talk to me about the different Jewish organizations that you specifically are involved with and the dynamics between them and what you have created. Because ultimately you worked for an organization and then you started your own organization.
Right.
And I just want to hear all about that, or as much as we can here. What am I getting at? I'm getting at, we have politics in the Moscow community as well, right? There are enough of us. There's so many people, and there's so many jobs that need to be filled, and so many important things that need to be done. It's not. I'm just thinking of someone listening to this and thinking, there's this little hole in the wall, and there's gefilte fish there, and some old people come for Yuskor,
Right.
and then it's just nothing. But paint us a picture of what the organization looks like.
No, again,
the community.
Thank you, Brady, for again giving me this viewpoint, which I don't have in my head, because that's something so natural for me. I grew up here. Russia is really unique. Okay, now I'm trying to find people who are going to work for me. I'm interviewing couples for shlichot, and they're saying the same thing as you say now. So you have this minyan, and you paid for the people to come because they are only old people. I'm like, do you know what you're talking about? Okay, Moscow is flourishing, Baruch Hashem. It was always flourishing in these terms, There are tons of young people who are coming and interested, and they're young professionals, and there's a huge Chabad center, as you know, in Marina, Russia. And there are families, people who are becoming from, there's everything in Moscow. And like you said, even in this place, in this region I'm living now, which you were living in when you were growing up, I think there are 7 communities, 6 communities, big and small, and restaurants and cafes and pizzas and whatever. It's a lot of things going on here. So like you said, every community has its own politics, its own hashkafa, and what they do and what they don't do. And I think in every, place in the world, sometimes one student, let's say, can go to different organizations, and he spends Shabbos there, and he goes to Shurim here, and he helps being a leader in a different place. So yeah, people are not stuck to one community. People are really moving from one to another for different events, etc., etc. What you were mentioning about myself is that there was a point in my life where I understood that I want to build something on my own. I loved working with someone, and it's a much more safe place. It's much easier when you just come to I was always very passionate, about my job, and I was taking a lot of achrayas, taking a lot of responsibility. But when you're not, you have to think about, I was an educational director. So I'm thinking about, making a schedule and preparing lessons and doing some board meetings. Okay, now I have to worry about fundraising, and all the relationship with all those different organizations and funds, and it's much more crazy. But again, Hashem just pushes you and pushes you and pushes you, and you accept on yourself things which are not matzim, I'm not a fundraiser by nature. It's something which I hate. Okay. And I hate having all this responsibility on my shoulders. I have 6 kids, Lianara. But there was a point in life where I understood that if I really want to do, Kirov, how I want to do Kirov, I have to build something myself. I also saw a very big hole in Moscow with all the, organizations there are. I saw that there's almost nothing for young professionals. People after finishing university, I still have nowhere to go. And in my eyes, it's a very important time in your life when you are after SAM, after university. Most are wanting to get married, or you're already married, having a lot of problems in your marriage. And then suddenly no one is interested in you because you are already 25, 27, 29, 30.
By no one, you mean the Jewish community has no programming or events?
There are tons now. There are millions of programming from the age of 18 to 25. Just every organization wants to eat you up and split you into pieces because all of them have some students program and stars programs and whatever. And then when you become 29, 28, so you probably have gone to those programs already and you're finished them, you're bored of them. And you want something on a more intellectual maybe level, and you don't need necessarily stipends or incentives like that. But you want content, you really want to grow. You really want to understand if it's something which you want to go for. So that became now my audience. Officially, Olami Moscow is also from the age of 18, 19, but most of my students are 27 till 32, 33. And a lot of things are happening there.
I'm assuming shidduchim is part of the program.
Right.
Talk to me how you do shidduchim when you have people who are becoming from, sort of from, not from. Maybe from yesterday they were from. How do you set people?
So the answer is I don't do shidduchim. That's this time in your life when I remember I got getting married and Moscow, everything is needed, right? There's always a lack of koach adam. And now, so I remember people calling me when I was just newlywed, and they were, you want to be a shadchanit? Yes. You want to be a balanit? Yes. You want to be whatever? You want to work for Bikul Cholim? Yes. I was that person who wanted to do everything. Now, I am 40 years after that, and I understand that if you want to do something good, you have to specialize. So shidduchim is not my field, and I'm telling it openly to everyone around. I am not a shadchanit.
Okay, but for what you know of,
right.
And you work with couples and their complicated relationships.
No, again, I'm a family psychologist. That's a very different thing.
Family.
And I am a meduchat kala. I'm preparing girls for marriage. Again, that's a very different thing.
To me, it sounds like you still do everything, but okay.
It's a very Moscow thing, right? Okay, so shidduchim, like you said, in Moscow, it's very complicated because everyone has different backgrounds. It's not again, a Lakewood boy and a Lakewood girl and and now they're a perfect match. It's much more complicated because they have very different backgrounds. And he's about tshuva and she's about tshuva, balas tshuva, right? But she is on that level and he's at this level, and he wants someone more strong because he wants to go up, and she was it's crazy, okay? So it's still the biggest problem, especially now because many, many, many boys left, after we had a certain political situation here. So now I'm having 80% girls maybe and 20% boys. So it's a very tricky situation. They all want to get married. So the question is to whom? So I work a lot with different shadchaniyot, that come to Moscow. They don't live here. They come. And they interview the guys, they speak to them, they talk to them, and then they're trying to match them. And most shidduchim, Brady, I'll tell you honestly, are happening by themselves. No one is officially doing the shidduch. They just meet each other at my Shabbos table. Okay, I had a lot of couples like that. And then they just talk to me and say, okay, we know you're not a shadit, but I just like that girl, so can you talk to her? And that's much easier for me because, again, I'm not the one who has this ruach kodesh about this boy being good for that girl. Have no clue.
So knowing a little bit about Western communities,
right.
Israel, the States, Europe, and you have the Russian community, when you deal professionally with them, whether it's community or as a psychologist, are there any issues, family dynamic and issues that are unique to the Russian community?
Afraid you would only talk about that for hours and years because it's very hard for a person who's not you are a good address because you grew up here. The mentality is very different from everything that you were talking about before. Something we have to mention in the very beginning is that Moscow community is there are many parts of it. Okay. Let's say we have Sephardi community. We have people coming from Caucasus. Okay. And we have people from Krasnaya Slavada and Kuba, and all kinds of Sephardi Jews, which are also very different in themselves, and the Gruzini community and the Ashkenazi community. This is one thing which has to, and they all have very different mentalities. And because they all live in Moscow, they got married a lot. Now we can find a lot of Ashkenazi girl marrying a Sephardi boy. And then they have this, split of mentalities and say, well, family, and I have to deal with it. There's a general problem of Balei Tshuva, who are getting married and they look at different families and they say, wow, 8 kids is beautiful. I want to have 8 kids. And she has no idea what a kid is like, right? She has never seen kids in her life because she was an only kid. And now they are together wanting to have 8 kids, and she gives birth one after the other. And suddenly their marriage falls apart because they don't know how to bring up kids and they don't have help and they don't have a model. And they just wanted to be like, a nice family. They went to Shabbos. So that's another problem, which I'm facing a lot. Is that people are not understanding that you can't just take a picture of a different family from America, who came to Russia for 2 weeks and try to build this model in your own home because you're different. That's something I'm struggling a lot with, and I'm trying to prepare people before marriage. I'm doing a lot of, pre-marital classes, even to people who are not in shidduchim yet, just to explain to them that, like all those, things that were different, and Hashem was different things from you. And if you like something, that's perfect. But you have to, realize if you're ready for that, and if your husband is ready for that, and how you communicate with each other. The idea of communication, I think, is a very weak part in this part of the world, because people are not it's the communication skills are very, very weak. I see a lot, family members hiding from each other the fact that someone is sick in Russia. Okay, let's say mother becomes sick and she's not telling her parents because they're going to be very nervous. I don't think anywhere else in the world such a thing exists, So you keep something in secret because you don't want other people to be worried, and then you suffer alone. Things that just make me crazy. Different mentality things which influence the family life a lot. Sexuality, okay, is a topic which people are not even considering to talk about, and when I'm talking openly about this, inside your family with your husband, they're like, you are a rabbit son? Telling me to talk to my husband about that? I am crazy. My parents never spoke to me about sexuality. Okay. That's just the reality of life they were brought in. They never talked to their mother about sex.
It is a very new concept, and America is definitely taking it to the opposite extreme. These are great examples. What else did we not cover that you feel is important to?
Well, so basically, one important thing, which I think is maybe unique, and you tell me if it is, when I teach my students, okay, when I was building this new center, really from scratch, we didn't have a building for 3 years, and we were just renting halls and renting apartments and renting, studios, whatever. It was crazy. Now I have a building, a very nice, fancy building with different classes and a place for Shabbos meals, which is amazing. My goal is growth. Every person has his motto in his head. So for me, it's growth, and growth in different spheres of life. I want my students to grow religiously, meaning spiritually, okay, but also emotionally and professionally. For me, it's very important that the graduates of Olami Moscow would be people who build healthy families and who grow professionally, who want to become more in their professional lives, and people who work on themselves, even if they didn't become from, but let's say they working on themselves. That's also very important for me, because I think that sometimes in Kiro we forget about that. We're all about Shomer Shabbos, which is amazing. But I saw so many examples in my life of people who became Shomer Shabbos, and they maybe even went to yeshiva, but they're not, they don't grow professionally. They are always trying to find some stipend, and they didn't realize themselves as, as people. So I'm having tons of workshops and different seminars that really about personal growth, musar and non-musar, and professional development, because I feel that we live in a century where a woman, a man, doesn't matter. We all want to grow professionally. We all want to realize our missions also through our professions, because our professions cover such a big part of your life. Let's say you, right? You found this something which gives you to realize your potential. I'm sure it's part of your life mission, right? So that's what I want for my students. I want them to grow in different spheres of their lives and see that it's all about that Hashem. Like, I think that a person who works on themselves and builds a healthy family and grows professionally, it's all about serving our Creator.
So you chose Kirov because of a calling, or was there something more intellectual about it?
I think, it was especially Davar, it was a calling, because that was something I was naturally good in. Like, I was having those discussions when I was a kid, and my house was also, I had a very small apartment where I lived with my mother and father, like a 1-bedroom apartment. It was a very small apartment, but we always had guests, and people who tried to come and see what's a kiddush. Like, it was something so natural for me that, of course, it was a calling. But afterwards, a lot of success I'm having is because I'm also having my secular knowledge and having my secular profession. And people who come and who are not so much interested in Torah, let's be honest, but a lot of girls are interested in psychology. And when they see this, frum lady wearing something strange in her head, talking intellectual things about psychology and family relationships, so they are becoming much more open to everything else I'm saying.
So you're attracting them on an intellectual level, not necessarily a religious level. Do you see issues with children of Balei Tshuva struggling with the Sviva and not wanting to be from?
Not necessarily with this Sviva, like that's less, because Baruch Hashem, we have already not a lot, but we still have families, they have friends. Let's say my kids have all their friends are from. It's very different from the way I grew up. But I think a lot of children of Balei Tshuva, and not necessarily in Russia, I think all around the world, maybe in Israel also, where there are Russian-speaking families, they struggle with the fact that their parents becoming from are not happy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they see, I have those students telling me that they're from, but they're suffering. In order to stay from and become and to grow in your Yiddishkeit, you have to see that your parents are happy. I think that's like a very important thing. And many Balei Tshuva, for different reasons, they are very from, but not necessarily happy. And that gives a bad impression about Yiddishkeit to their kids. That's something I see a lot.
How did you decide to stay when many people left? Was that a calling also?
It was a very, very hard decision. And I didn't, no one knew what's going to be here. I'm not sure everyone knows now. But I believe very much that when you dig in, your neshama a lot, and you ask yourself, what does Hashem want from me? Of course, sometimes you ask for advice, which is also very normal and natural. You understand where you are needed. When you have certain missions, I think that the world, you don't think about what's more comfortable for me. I'm sure it's much more comfortable for me would be to be in Israel, and have normal chinuch for my kids and whatever, and not think about different things I'm thinking now. But where I'm most needed now, I think for now it's Moscow, because not many people would agree to live in a life I'm living now. And Baruch Hashem, my life is highly, highly, highly productive. I think in other places, my life would be much more comfortable, but probably less productive.
What are your goals for your kids? Do you want to send them away? Where are you holding right now? Do you want to keep them? Would you want them to all stay and continue doing Kirov like you?
Kirov is something which is very, it has to be good for a kid. I can't tell all of my 6 kids, okay, so now you're going to be my, I can't find a couple, so you're going to be my next couple. You can't just throw on a kid a thing like that. I'm sure that for some of them, that would be something they would love. And for sure that they admire that. And my daughter dreams about opening Olami Moscow in Israel. She has all this interesting ideas, but it's not for all of them. And I'm not someone who's going to push anyone into Kirov, because as my kids, they know all the advantages of Kirov and they know all the disadvantages of Kirov. They know how hard it is and they know how inspired we are. So I'm sure some of them will find something else, and some of them probably will go, in the direction.
Are you planning to send them away, or?
At a certain age, I think I would have to. I don't feel there's an option, okay? But the advice I got from my, friends and from your mother and from other people I admire was that try to keep them home as much as you can. I would think about even sending my kid now, who just turned 13, but emotionally, it's still not the right decision. So I'm keeping him home for about a year or 2. Till he is mature enough to leave.
Okay, it was so amazing having you on, Sarah. This was such an honor for me, truly.
Thank you so much.
And if anyone wants to follow you or find you or connect with you, how could they find you?
Okay, you can find me Olami Moscow on Instagram and myself on Instagram. And I have, if there are Russian speakers who are listening to that, so I have also a Telegram channel, which is called Porция Вдохновения, a portion of inspiration. And I write different ideas, different Torah, I write cases which I'm dealing with every day. So that can also be something which people who speak Russian can be interested in.
Fantastic. We'll link them in the show notes. And thank you so much, Sarah. I wish you much hatzlacha. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
And this is our last and final back and forth. We have Benjamin Moalen back. It's so nice to have you back.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
And we have you responding to last week's response to Esti. Tell us what you have to say. And the reason I'm doing this, normally I do not have responses go back and forth. I'll have a response and then the rest can be taken to social media or in a private conversation. But you did really pour your heart out there. And we did get some people who did want to set you up with people. So there was some of that happening, as well as women like Esti reaching out with their feedback. And many people did reach out after yesterday's release, thanking Esti's representation. And it was both male and female. All I want to say is she's not the only one who was thinking what she said. But I will have you respond because you did really open yourself up and maybe you didn't realize how bad it could get. So I'd love for you to respond.
Yeah, I'm okay with criticism. I'm okay with people disagreeing with me. And Esti makes some valid points. I don't deny that. But she clearly misunderstood and misconstrued a lot of what I said. To quote a friend of mine who listened to both what I said and what she said, Esti should have listened to my interview again and taken better notes. So I've got a list here of notes that I took while listening to what she said, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond. So number one, she says that it was almost in a dismissive way. You have a guy who's been working on it for 10 years. He's not going to change. So to set the record straight, I have not been working on this for 10 years. 10 years ago, I didn't even know I had these issues. I was completely self-unaware. I only became aware that I had these issues less than 7 years ago. And I learned about attachment theory about 3 years ago. And if you combine all the amount of time that I actually consciously decided that, yes, I'm going to be working on this issue, we're talking about a period of time of approximately 3 years, one of which was during COVID. So I was basically in seclusion, which did actually help. Number two, she completely misunderstood my lifting weights analogy. I think the way she understood it was that I was referring to women as weights, and which is ridiculous. I didn't imply that. The analogy is meant for the person who's going through the attachment issues. When I use the metaphor of lifting weights, it's that when you are working through the problems you have with being in a relationship, what you have with attachment, the more you go into it and work yourself through it, not discard women like a 10-pound weight and a 20-pound weight, but meaning instead of dropping a relationship and running away, which would be like dropping the weights and just running out of the gym, meaning you would try to work through the relationship. The metaphor is for the person themselves in working through it. And once you get to the end, you will be very accomplished in what you have gotten to by working through your problems instead of running away from them. And it's not at all having to do with the woman involved. It has to do with the person who's working through, or the man, in the case of women is avoidant. It's working through the issue. It's the metaphors on the person, nothing to do with the women. And I did not intend to refer to women as weights, and I would never do that. Number three, she completely misunderstood my reference to the 9-month relationship I once had. She made it seem like I was patting myself on the back for having been in a 9-month relationship, so no problem. No, it's the exact opposite. It was that relationship that had a ton of problems, which only after it ended did I realize that I had these issues. So I'm not congratulating myself, and the length of time is not even relevant to the story. It's the journey it's the fact that relationship put me onto the journey that I'm currently on. The point is that before that, I was completely self-unaware, and now I am more aware. So that was also a misunderstanding. The mere fact that somebody's in a 9-month relationship is not saying that, I'm closer to getting married. That wasn't the point at all. It was that relationship set me on the path that I'm on now. Number four, so she's absolutely correct in that my issues are not somebody else's to correct. That's 100% true, and I didn't imply otherwise. They're my issues and mine alone. When I gave advice, so to speak, to somebody, for somebody to be patient, first of all, it was very clear that has to come with pressure too. I think she made it seem like that wasn't it, that somebody just to be patient forever. I was very clear that that's not the case. It's not for everyone, and you could take it or leave it. It's meant for somebody who truly sees something in someone and thinks that there's a good possibility that the relationship could progress to the next level. I'm making a suggestion, not to scare them away. And when I say that there should be patience plus pressure, patience and pressure is kind of like space, is giving the person space to realize people who are avoidant have this, are fiercely independent. They like their personal space. They need to know that their personal space is not going to be permanently taken away from them. They need to, and if somebody always needs to be attached to the hip with someone, then that's not the right match. But some people are fine with that. And if they just need to reassure their partner that, hey, I'm not going to be taking away all of your personal space and your independence. So it's just basically calming them down. Now, obviously, if it's not going anywhere after a period of time, and that's a subjective amount, then, everyone's got to do what's right for them. I'm just throwing a suggestion out there for somebody who sees potential in something and how they think that something can progress. She made some generalizations based on anecdotes about, I don't know whether her own experiences or friends of hers who suffered from being burned in these situations. But for every anecdote that she has, I have friends who have gone through the same thing and have made it through and are happily married. So I don't know if there's data out there. I really don't know. But as far as I know, it's for every story she has, I've got an opposing story. So really, everybody needs to judge what's right for them. I think just important, generalization is just in general is not fair. And so long as a person is aware of what their issues are, both sides, the person who's going through the issues and the person they're dating, and they're working through the issues, then I think that, everybody needs to judge for them if that's working. But if that has, an end point and a happy ending, but I just wanted to clear that up. All right, number 5, maybe I'm misunderstanding her, but when she said, if you like somebody and they like you, she said something along the lines of things aren't that complicated and anything could be worked out. Again, I feel that this is more of a generalization, nothing to do with me personally. I think that that's a generalization that is objectively false. I think everybody in a relationship is always working on their relationship in order for the relationship to remain intact. For some people, it's very easy to fall in love and they're happy, and that's great. But I think that that's not the case for everybody. And that doesn't mean that those people aren't deserving of being in a relationship. I think things aren't so cut and dry, and that's kind of an oversimplification. Number 6, to your point about people who are avoidance and that being a red flag. So yes, it is a red flag. I agree with that. However, it's not something that is an automatic conclusion that this is necessarily a deal breaker. It should lead to more questions. Is the person aware of their problems? Are they working through those issues? It's not a monolith, and we need to be careful not to paint everyone with the same brush. At the end of the day, we're all individuals. We all have our own set of issues, and each person should be analyzed separately. And again, everybody needs to, the other person, the person that the avoidant person is going out with, has to know how much tolerance that they have, and that's 100% needs to be respected by both sides. On a more general level, regarding when to suspect avoidance, she gave a threshold of about 25. I think that's low, especially in more modern communities where a lot of men are focused on their careers for a while. It takes them time to start dating. And I would probably actually agree with her assessment for someone who's 30 or even 35, depending on multiple factors. Finally, on a personal level, I would want to add that for most of my 20s and my early 30s, I lived in Chicago. My dating options were few and far between. I didn't date very much, and that's putting it lightly. And I quickly learned that traveling to date simply wasn't something that worked for me. And so it took me a lot longer to be in a situation that opened my eyes to the situation that I'm actually in. And like I said, my awakening came only about 7 years ago. And between that and other things going on in my life, the actual work I've been able to devote to this has been far less than that. Like I said, it's probably around 3 years. So am I late to the game? Yes, but it's better late than never. And that's my response.
Thank you so much. I have 2 questions for you. Do you feel ready to get married right now?
Well, it's a hard question to answer because I'm not dating somebody, so it's too theoretical a question, I think. I mean...
Well, if somebody well-meaning wanted to set you up with somebody, is that...
This is too theoretical a question. Yes, I'm not sure if I said this in the last interview you did with me. For much of my 20s and early 30s, if somebody would have asked me that question, I said, yes, of course. But that's lip service.
But now that you've done the work over the last 3 years,
but I would need to apply the work in a situation in which I'm in a relationship and I'm ready to do the work. Yes.
And one more question, and it's just an eye-opening question. You're not necessarily supposed to answer it or have an answer to it. Can you see how telling someone that you just learned about this 10 years ago and you've just been working on this for the last 3 years, in comparison to if you start thinking of yourself as a dater and when you're 21, 22, it's a long time. But to someone who just life happens and you deal with stuff, 3 years to deal with something. I mean, you have people who get divorced or, God forbid, lose a spouse. And then if they're remarried within 3 years, nobody's thinking, oh, that's too short. Like a life can happen in 3 years. So if somebody's thinking, okay, 3 years, now what do you have to show for it? Don't expect people to treat you like this is brand new. This didn't happen 2 months ago.
I'm not looking for anybody to treat me. I'm not looking for anybody to look at me like a nebuch or to feel sorry for me. Not at all.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Is when you're defending yourself, you're saying, I only started working on this over the last 3 years.
Okay, so
they're thinking, but it's not only 3 years. That's what they're thinking.
Okay, so first of all, you're right, and look, to each their own. If Esti had come on and said he's been working at it for 3 years, that's way too long of a time. I was coming down to set the record straight. Number two, during the 3 years, you also need to find somebody. I mean, not everybody who starts dating who has zero baggage or zero avoidance issues end up marrying the first person they date. Sometimes it takes 3, 4. Somebody who really starts in earnest when they're 21 might not get married till they're 27. Does that mean like, okay, they've been dating for 6 years, there's something wrong with them? But
they might not go on a 4th, 5th, 7th, 10th, 12th date either with that same person. Meaning you should be able to tell where there should be that goal in mind to try to tell right away if this person.
But I disagree. I don't think you can tell right away if someone's compatible for you. Especially as you get older.
But you could tell if they're not compatible for you.
That's true. And I mean, there have not been too many girls that I've gone on that many dates with.
Thank you so much for setting the record straight. I think with this, we can complete this conversation, move on to new topics.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening until the end. And as promised, I will read to you my message from an anonymous shadchan. The reason I know I need to go on a break as a matchmaker. Let us start with the lady who requests all my time. Tells me it is not her job to ignite excitement or to have answers. But I must bring all that to the table for her daughter. And she does not send a gift. She does not send flowers. She does not send a thank you. But she sends an abundance of criticism in exchange for the hours I spend on setting her daughter up. To the ladies who send me 5-minute voice notes after repeated requests to send texts instead. At least you feel some remorse as you preempt each voice note with, I'm sorry for this voice note, but... To the man and the woman who respond with my suggestions to him and her, I told you I need someone cool and attractive. To the single that have spent hours of time looking for a match, setting him or her up time and time again, receiving not a single thank you, but a handful of complaints. You can stop sending me requests to send you compatible matches again and again. We are done and we are through. To the woman who sent me a small fee to keep her daughter in mind for a month, I spent hours and days trying to find a guy to go out with your daughter. I was able to get her on one date that month. Regretfully, you thought I stole money from you. I returned your money and hope that I never cross paths with you again. I wish you and your daughter best of luck and far from my life. To the woman who bothered me for months to set up her daughter, we both know I set your daughter up with numerous wonderful men. I then sent your daughter's current husband your daughter's profile, and he decided to go ahead with the suggestion through a different matchmaker. That is all right with me, but it pains me deeply when not only did I not get a thank you, but I wasn't invited to your daughter's wedding that was all over my Instagram feed. It's clear that your kind matters toward me was solely dependent on the time that your daughter was dating. To the girls that reach out to me every week for suggestions and don't hesitate to message me back within minutes of a suggestion. Where are you when I need to reach you for feedback for the boy? Where are you after a date when I'm trying to reach you? To the single that I have tried for years to set up and help find his intended one, why did I find out from a neighbor months after you got married? To the young men and women out there and their parents who make it clear that they think I am the reason that their single is still single. It is my fault that the single does not come off as attractive or kind or ... Stop looking at me and go look in the mirror. I thought this message is worth sharing, especially because I've been wanting to get that side of the shadchan. We have so many frustrated singles. We also have so many frustrated shadchanim. How could we make this better? Most shadchanim are unpaid and they work so hard. Many of the times they are left holding the heartbreak and all the hard feelings on behalf of everyone else. Can we do more? What are your thoughts? Thanks for listening until the end. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Feel free to join the discussion group. You can join by sending me an email. My information is in the show notes, and I hope you have a great week. See you next time.